I'm going to show you a brilliant attacking game played by Michael Tal, the legendary player who was also called the magician from Riga. He never shied away from setting the board on fire, always looking for adventurous chess. And this game is no exception. It's a brilliant attacking masterpiece which he played back in 1957 at the Soviet Championships. Michael Tal was only 20 years old at that time, but he managed to win that championship, one of the strongest events in the world at that time. He is playing in this game with the black pieces against Bukuti Gurgenidze, and it's a game which is known for many years. Everybody loves to see this game. If you haven't seen this game yet, don't worry, I'm going to show you all the ins and outs. Let's just dive straight into the action as Gurgenidze opens the game with the move 1d4. We're looking from black's perspective because we want to see how Michael Tal is going to crush his opponent in only 27 moves. He does it with the move knight f6. White goes for c4 and here c5. And Michael Tal loved to play the Benoni defense, or better said the Benoni attack, because it's a super sharp opening. White is grabbing space in the center, but black is going to challenge it with the move e6. White goes knight c3, and here black captures the pawn on d5. White does recapture, and here it's the move d6. This is basically the starting position from the Benoni opening. And you can already see there is an imbalance in pawn structure. Black does have an extra pawn on the queen side. Nice pawn on c5, but white always has the possibility here to occupy the center with a pawn on e4. Sometimes even play more aggressively by also bringing up the pawn to f4. It is a perfect counter opening. Let's see how it works in practice. Here Gurgenidze goes for the move knight f3. Black goes for the move g6, intending to put the bishop on the long diagonal. White goes for the move e4, bishop g7 as I said, and Gurgenidze opts for a very solid setup here with the move bishop e2. Both sides are going to castle kingside. Black puts the rook on e8, so now the rook is on the half open file, attacking the pawn on e4 together with the knight. And white drops back with the knight to d2 to further strengthen the pawn on e4. This may look strange at the first sight, as the bishop on c1 is not able to be developed, but it's part of white's strategy. This is what is called the classical variation, and white's main aim is to support the center, not giving black any chance to try to destroy white's center. But in the game we will see how it can go terribly wrong for white. Here there are different ways of playing. Black can, for instance, consider developing the knight via d7 to e5, typical plan. Another very well-known idea for black is to develop the knight via a6. This is interesting maneuver. You never have to be concerned about the bishop taking that knight, because after b takes a6 you do get a very nice half open file for the rook to exert pressure on the queen side. Now white has different ways of proceeding here, and I think objectively speaking the best way of playing for white here is to put the pawn on f3. So you create very nice pawn chains, very solid structure for white, and after that white has plans to put the knight on c4, maybe the bishop to f4. Well, there is in fact quite a bit of theory there, but we are not going to check out these lines. We want to see what happened in the game as the move rook e1 was played. Now the knight goes back to c7. At some point black is probably ready to get in some pawn break on the queen side with moves like a6, b5, and it can even be supported with a bishop or with a rook coming to b8. Therefore, white played the move a4, covering the b5 square one more time, and black instead plays here the move b6. So this may look slow, but there are some clear ideas. For instance, you want to follow up with a6 and then rook b8 and maybe b5 at the right moment. Also, whenever a knight comes to c4, you're able to put your bishop on a6 and try to trade off the bishop for a knight. So this is a very typical plan. White played the move queen c2, overprotecting that pawn on e4, so getting ready to put the knight from d2 on a better square. Now, interesting moment, as there are various ways of playing here for black, but True to his style, Michael Tal is looking for the most adventurous way of playing as he jumps with the knight to g4. A very typical idea in this opening. So what are the ideas behind this move? First of all, you're opening up the diagonal for the bishop. So the bishop is putting pressure against the knight, against the pawn. Sometimes the rook can become a problem. Also the bishop can come into d4, adding more pressure to the pawn on f2. So that's one idea. But also the knight is ready to come to e5, and another piece is also benefiting from this move as the queen is now able to come to h4, creating threats against white's king side. How should white deal with this threat? Of course, it is possible to take with the bishop on g4. Maybe that is something white should have done. It was not played in the game, but let me quickly show you. If you do take back with the bishop, now the knight can come to c4, and on the next move probably the bishop will come to f4 with pressure against the pawn on d6. This backward pawn is often a liability in black's setup. So probably white is doing pretty okay here, but instead Gurgenidze felt like, okay, he can just kick that knight away with the move h3, attacking the knight, and here you would expect the knight to go back to e5. But now Michael Tal had a different idea. Look at this, guys. You're going to be entertained with this move. Knight takes f2. Knight sacrifice, opening up the king side. And well, that is a very interesting idea. But how is this ever going to work for white? Because black is still having quite a hard time getting his pieces into the attack. It's still a long time to create something here. So what should white do? You can actually ignore the threat here by, for instance, putting your knight on f3, trying to consolidate your position. The knight can't go anywhere. This is a total mess. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe you're able to sacrifice a piece and get a number of pawns for it. Well, there are a lot of complicated lines, but you're all curious to see what happens after white captures the knight on f2. Well, the queen comes in to h4 with check, and the king has to be very careful. If it goes back to g1, then the rook on e1 is hanging. So that is something you cannot avoid. If you block with your pawn the check with the move g3, well, then it's bishop to d4 check. The move g3 was not played, but it's a very important line. Let me show you this. It's a check. If the king goes away, you can, for instance, put the queen on h5. And if the king goes back now to g2, then you can take on h3 with check. And the king doesn't have many good squares to go to at all. All these squares have been covered. King h2 runs into bishop g4 check. And after king to g2, it is queen h3 with checkmate. So you see that black has quite a number of long-range pieces, two bishops and the queen, who are very quick joining the attack on the king side. Anyway, white didn't play the move g3, but instead dropped back with the king to f1, keeping the rook defended. So where is black's compensation? Well, bishop to d4. The bishop comes in and covers the f2 square, so black is about to place the queen on f2 with checkmate. Here you can see that all white's pieces, they are too far away and are not able to help out in defense. Well, actually there's only one piece which can cover the mating threat, and the knight has to go back to d1. So now the knight is preventing the queen from coming to f2. That's not a good idea. And how to follow up? Well, look at this. Here is the next blow. Beautiful queen sacrifice. Queen takes h3. Maybe this was overlooked by Gurgenidze in advance. Well, the point is that if you do take the queen, this bishop takes h3 with checkmate. With the help of two bishops, these pieces are covering all these squares, while the rook and the bishop are standing in the way of the king. The king can't escape. Well, after queen takes h3, therefore, white has to be careful, cannot take the queen, and has to deal with the mating threat on h1. Bishop to f3 was played here, so that the king is able to be evacuated via the center. Of course, the white is also threatening to take the queen now, so black moves the queen to h2. This is kind of a silent move. I mean, you're threatening a check, but I don't think there's an immediate mating threat here. So white is trying to find a way to consolidate his position. So the knight comes to e3. So the knight leaves the back rank, is now placed in the center. But well, there are other problems to deal with. And well, in the next couple of moves, Michael Tal comes up with some very beautiful attacking ideas, adding more pressure to white's position. Black played the move f5, putting pressure against the pawn on e4. Of course, if you ever take that pawn, then the knight on e3 can just be captured when black does regain the material with an ongoing attack. That's not recommendable for white, but white should do something else, while at the same time you also got to reckon with ideas like the bishop coming to a6 with check. Looks incredibly dangerous. The king doesn't have many squares to go to. So white played here the move knight dc4. The knight is on a somewhat more active square and the bishop does further support the knight on e3. But black opens up the position here with the move pawn takes e4, attacking the bishop. Bishop takes e4, and as announced already, the black bishop from c8 comes to a6 to pin the knight on c4. Here you see that the knights, they are not great defenders. They're under tremendous pressure by black's pieces, and also the rook on e8 does hit the white's pieces on the e file. And of course there are also additional plans like bringing a rook to the f file. Well, therefore, to guard the king a bit better, bishop went back to f3. So everything is still under control, but it's very difficult to untangle here from white's perspective. And what should black do? Simple chess. You have a queen in the attack. Both the bishops are looking great. The rook on e8 is okay, but the two other pieces, the knight on c7 and the rook on a8, they are not doing that much yet. How to proceed? Improve your pieces, and you can start by doing so with the move rook to e5. Beautiful idea. The rook of course can't be taken because the knight on c4 is pinned, so that's the first idea. But second idea is that the rook from a8 is ready to join the attack by going to e8 or possibly even f8. Well, white activated the rook from a1 via the third rank, so the rook supports the knight on e3 as well. And here Tal played the move rook a e8. So here you see that both rooks are now adding tremendous pressure against the knight on e3. By the way, that knight can never really go anywhere. The rook on e1 will be taken, or there will be a checkmate idea as the bishop on d4 is covering the g1 square as well. So white is a piece up, but can barely move. So in the game, there followed the move bishop d2. I mean, difficult to suggest a better idea for white. So white is trying to bring the bishop into the game. Everything seems to be well protected. But now, after having sacrificed a knight and the queen, which was of course not accepted, now time for sacrifice number 3. Look at this. Knight takes d5. Brilliant idea. The knight on c7 was ready to sacrifice itself, with the point that if you take with the knight on d5, now it is queen to g1 with checkmate, as the king can't go to the e file. Bishop defends the queen. So you can't take with the knight. But in the game there followed bishop takes d5 with check. But of course Tal had seen all of this. Rook takes d5, brilliant idea, sacrificing the rook. But we are familiar with the mating pattern already. After knight takes d5, it is queen to g1 with checkmate. So that's not an option. And well, black has a very simple plan here, just to go back with the rook, for instance to e5 or maybe to another square, after which you can push your pawn to d5 when the knight on c4 is still struggling from this very annoying pin. So what white attempted to do here is to run away with the king to e2. And you can see that if the king is able to hide, let's say on d1 or c1 on the queen side, things are not that simple. Therefore, black needs to act in a very concrete manner here. And Tal had no difficulties to to refute this idea, as he decided here to take with the bishop on e3, eliminating a very important defender. So bishop takes e3. You cannot take with the knight because of the pin, as I said. The king can also not take. And well, if you do take with the bishop, for instance, now the point is there is queen takes g2 with checkmate. The bishop cannot interfere because of the pin, while the rook on d5 prevents the king from going to the queen side. So that is beautiful checkmate. In order to avoid loss of material, black decided to take with the rook on e3, but this is also not gonna help at all, because there is the following trade. Bishop takes c4 with check, and it's game over. For instance, if you take with the queen, then the point is there's queen takes g2 again with check, king to d1, and now it's queen takes d2 with checkmate. That's why black wanted to deflect the queen from the c2 square. So if we go back to this position after bishop takes c4, the queen can't really take. However, if you go with your king to d1, well, for instance, you can take on e3, rook takes e3, and now you can give a check on g1. And if you block with the rook, there's even something like queen f2. Maybe there are other moves possible here as well. But you can see that black is up 3 pawns with a massive mating attack. Queen can never take on c4 because of checkmate on d2. So anyway, after this move, bishop c4, Gurgenidze resigned. And this was a very important victory for Michael Tal, who went on to win the Soviet Championships. It is a year for the first time. He even managed to win it the year after as well, in 1958. And not surprisingly, Michael Tal became world champion in 1960. So he's one of the favorite world champions of all time, always creating brilliant attacking masterpieces. That's why I covered this game on the channel. Let me know what you think of this game. And if you would like to see any other game played by Michael Tal covered on this channel, feel free to let me know. Also, please subscribe to the channel to help the channel grow. You can give this video a like. You can also make a small PayPal donation. Thanks to everyone for helping me to grow the channel. Stay tuned for more exciting games on this channel. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.